for 3 years. I coached with Doug Collins for 2.5 years. And that, little did I know how insecure being an NBA coach would be, the tenure of it. When they fire your head coach, or he decides he wants to quit, or gets fired, or whatever, for whatever reason, leaves his position, more than likely all the assistants are going to have to leave their jobs too. So you're talking about anytime there's a head coaching change, there's about 50 people involved in changing. You've got wives, kids, support staff, all that stuff are going to have to change. So I coached 2.5 years with Doug, and then a half a year with Alvin Gentry. And at the end of the year, the ownership wanted to make a change with all the assistant coaches. And even though Alvin Gentry wanted to keep me, and the ownership thought differently. So luckily for me, I had become friends with a guy by the name of Butch Carter, who played his basketball in Indiana. He was a pro player, and he was going to be the new head coach of the Toronto Raptors. And he asked me if I would consider coming up and being the number one assistant with the Raptors. And I jumped at the chance. It was only a 3-hour and 45-minute drive from where I was living in Michigan. So then I had the experience about living away from your family. You know what I mean? Because my family stayed to stay in American schools. But 3 days into the job with the Raptors, we traded Marcus Camby for Charles Oakley, who was one of my favorite players of all time to coach in the NBA. And then my first month on the job, we drafted a young rookie by the name, who I worked out for his NBA workout for us, by the name of Vince Carter. and he had worked out in Denver the night before, flew, did not get into Toronto till close to 3 a.m. We had a 9 a.m. workout. And he apologized before the workout. He goes, "I'm going to do my best, but I don't know how good I'll be today." Well, he was jumping out of the hemisphere, okay, catching lob dunks. And I've never seen a guy put his elbow over the square before, you know. And Glenn Grunwald and Butch Carter and I, Glenn Grunwald was our general manager, we all unanimously agreed that this is the guy we want. And it worked out for us that we got him in the draft.
So what was that like to see him retire this year when you think about how much time had passed?
It's amazing. 22 years, right? 22 years he played.
Crazy.
It's so emotional for me because I was there when he was still in college. And we got to drafting, and we got to see him when he was electrifying early in his career with the Raptors. He just took over the country of Canada. And basically, you know, so obviously he was the leading vote getter for the All-Star game because he had a whole country voting for him.
Yeah.
And you know, we drove him to the arena when he won the slam dunk champ, you know, out in the Bay City. You know, remember when he and Tracy McGrady were going neck and neck for the slam dunk?
Through the legs.
Oh yeah. So, you know, we had just a special time. He lived in the building next to ours, and we both lived only 2 blocks from the arena, Air Canada Center. So it was just a special time. Basketball for the first time in Canada, really at a high level, a brand new arena. Our fans were fantastic. It was like an electrifying atmosphere, one of the best ever, and a great city to boot. So, and we were good.
What's one small thing maybe that you noticed about him when he was in his early 20s that made you think, I think this guy is not going to just last, but this could be kind of the elder statesman of the NBA? Like, what's one small thing you noticed?
One thing, I'm going to give you a positive and a negative, okay? He was such a great guy to be around, always pleasant. And the one thing that I loved about him is he wanted the ball at the end of the game. He made unbelievable game-winning shots. And what percent of all players, they're great players for, let's say, the first 45 minutes of an NBA game, but the last 3, they're going to throw it to you. Okay, now you go win the game for us. And Vince wasn't like that. I mean, the one playoff series, one of my highlights, we beat the Knicks in the first round in Game 5. The first round was 5 games in Madison Square Garden. We win at New York. And then we play Philadelphia in the second round, and that's where he and Allen Iverson were going back and forth. And it comes down to the final shot of Game 7, and Vince Carter misses the shot when he graduated from Carolina in the morning, okay, walked through ceremony, and then came back for the game. And but anyway, he and Allen Iverson, I believe, each got 50 points twice in that series, always at home. But, twice we beat them and Vince gets 50, and twice we lose to Philly in Philly and Iverson gets 50. The difference between Vince and Michael is Michael is a killer. Michael would do it, and every night, you know what I mean? And Vince didn't always do it every night, but what also one of the greatest players ever to play. I'm sorry he didn't win a championship, but a lot of times that's all depends on what team you play on too. But so he never did win an NBA championship, but he was close.
So you go from Toronto, and then I believe the Sixers, right? So did
no. I went to Washington then. I would have stayed.
Oh, that's right. The timeline's flipped in my head. Okay, so tell me the story about how you went to the Wizards, because now we're going to get into the MJ territory here.
Yeah, well, I would have stayed in Toronto for a long, long time, and was happy there, or I was thinking about going back to Detroit when they made, when there was Joe Dumars took over, and I had the opportunity to do that. But I get a call from Doug Collins, and the playoffs are still going on, and he says, "Hey, I had an interesting phone call from Michael Jordan, and Michael is the new president of the Washington Wizards, and as soon as the playoffs are over, he wants me to be the new coach of the Wizards next year. So I want you to come back and join forces with me." Well, you don't turn down the guy who got you your start in the NBA. Mm-hmm. I felt loyalty to Doug, and that's one of the reasons why I was able to get my first job. But then, obviously he goes, "I don't know if Michael's going to play or not, but he tells me, Brian, that he's working out every single day." Okay. So my guess is I think he's going to come back and play. So anyway, that's what started it. I flew from Toronto to Washington for Doug's press conference, and then had to turn around and fly right back because we're in the playoffs that last year with against Philadelphia. And I flew for the introductory press conference of Doug, and Michael said, "Hey, Jamesy, how you doing? I for whatever reason, I want Doug as my coach, and for whatever reason he wants you as his assistant. Why, I have no idea." So anyway, and really my nickname was not Jamesy, but that's what he called me. That's what he called me. So it kind of stuck with him. But anyway, that's how that got started.
I mean, was that surreal to you that, like, here's this guy that was out of the spotlight, retired? Like, do you remember thinking, like, wait, Michael Jordan's coming back?
Well, he really zinged me a couple times, because he and I were I used to rebound for him for a little bit when he was with the Bulls, and so he knew me and I knew him, and when he was a young player. And then we were negotiating my contract, and there were two things that he really got me on. He said they weren't going to pay for my cell phone bill, and that was a hang up. And I told Doug, I said, "Doug, there's some snags in the negotiation." So I remember driving from Toronto back to my home in Detroit, and my agent, John Langle, calls me, and he goes, "How long are you going to be on the road?" And I said, "Well, I've got about another 45 minutes to an hour." And he goes, "Well, Michael Jordan's going to call in 10 minutes, and we're going to go on a 3-way phone call." And he says, "Brian, let me do all the talking." Okay. So I said, "Fine." So I'm nervous wreck for the next 10 minutes. The phone rings. It's John Langle. And immediately I hear a voice. He says, "John, this is Michael. Is BJ on the phone?" And I said, "Michael, yeah, I'm here." He goes, "Are you taking this friggin' job or not?" Okay. So so anyway, I was stuttering around. I go, "Michael, yeah," but he goes, "Look, Johnny Bach said, do not Do not stutter your words. That's a form of weakness. So he goes, I want you as an assistant coach. So I took the job right then. And he goes, now we were negotiating between 3 years and a 4-year contract. And the 4th year was hinged on whether we made the playoffs in any of the first 3 years. So he goes, Brian, let me ask you some questions. Do you think I'm a pretty good player? That's what Michael Jordan asked me that. I said, Michael, I think you're a great player, maybe the best of all time. And he goes, well, I've been working out every day. I'm not saying I'm going to play, but do you think if I work out every single day that I could get us into playoffs? I said, Michael, I know that if you play, we're going to make the playoffs. And he goes, well, let me analyze this. That means you could sit over there in that chair and twiddle your thumbs, and I'm going to work my butt off and get us into playoffs, and I then get you another year on your contract. That's a hell of a deal. You better sign it. So that's how I got my contract with the Wizards. And, if he had not gotten hurt in year 1 and missed 6 weeks, Richard Hamilton missed 6 weeks, and then the second year he played in every game, but everybody else got hurt, we would have made the playoffs both years. We won 37. You need to win about 39 or 40.
What was the highlight of those couple of years when you look back at?
Well, I look back on it. I saw that Michael Jordan, how great the greatness he was. First of all, he was the most popular athlete of all time. Tiger Woods even came in our locker room one time after a game and whenever he was in town, or Alex Rodriguez when we were in Miami, or we would go to Philadelphia and play, and Donovan McNabb from the football team. Other athletes in other sports just gravitated to him. They wanted to rekindle their friendship with him. And then he, in practice, he tried to win every drill, every sprint, every scrimmage, and but yet he never showed up as coaches. He never and including, in the first dance, you notice he never really talked back to any of his coaches. He would get upset and he would maybe get on his teammates, but Dean Smith taught him to treat coaches with such respect, and he always did with me. It was like coaching Elvis Presley. I mean, people just wanted to either look at him or get close enough that maybe they could touch him. And, they were always yelling at him and saying nice things. But that's why he and I would never work out. You know how NBA players, if you go to an arena early, the guys are shooting like 90 minutes or 2 hours early as soon as they open the doors. Well, he would never work out in the arena. We would always go to their practice court and get a 20-minute workout, by ourselves before every game.
So what's the most misunderstood thing from your vantage point as an assistant coach who saw him when he was young with the Bulls when you're volunteering?
Yeah.
And you see him, as he's approaching 40.
Yeah.
What's the most misunderstood thing from your vantage point?
People don't think. Most people feel he shouldn't have come back with the Wizards, and I wasn't in the room when he got fired. I think they did him an injustice. I mean, he said we made money, we were profitable, we sold out every game on the road, 90 games, 82 regular season games, 8 preseason games. Every game that he stepped on the court was a sellout for 2 years. That's why I talk about Elvis Presley. And at 39 years of age, he was still our best player. And I believe 3 times got over 50 points in that season. And so anyway, and hit about 3 or 4 game-winning shots. He was still an elite player. He just not back-to-back nights, couldn't give it to you the second night like he did as a Bull player, and he didn't have the hops that he did as a Bull player. But if you gave him a couple days rest, the opponent was in for a boatload of trouble, to say the least.
So I know that there's some things that this is the code. You don't share certain things. I'm not going to ask you to get anything unsavory, but you got to have some crazy stories about just in practice, watching him interact with some of these young guys. I mean, what kind of stories do you have about him off camera?
Well, I'll never forget that that he would always kid with them, and they'd all have all kinds of shooting games and contests and things like that. I'm not saying it was for money or not for money. You choose. But there's not anybody that he really didn't know. And they used to sit in the training room and they go, okay, I bet you don't have Janet Jackson's number in your phone. And he goes, yeah, I do. Come on. And so they would call up Janet Jackson, or they would,
just call up Janet Jackson, just randomly.
Or just say, hey, Janet, how you doing? I just wanted to show these guys, or some star, some celebrity, man, woman, it doesn't make any difference, or athlete. So anyway, they always used to love that. And then obviously on the planes, it was always, you saw what the Bulls were doing on the planes, the card games. They were always a bunch of fun, and guys just wanted to play with him. And I go, why are you playing with this guy? He's just taking your per diem. Rookies wanted to play with him. He's got more money than you. He's just going to raise the bet. So, but anyway, I've never, all those stories about those young kids, they just idolized him as the coaches did. And yet, he would still ask serious questions about the game plan. He never tried to tell. He goes, okay, now, he and I would go, as I'm doing the board before a game, he would be coming in the locker room and getting his uniform on, and he would rehash with me exactly what our game plan was. How do I think he's going to be guarded? Who is he going to guard? What's his strengths, although he knew probably already the strengths, and how we were going to defend screen roll, because as a pro player, you could defend it a number of ways. So, and that's how serious he was as a basketball player, or you have to be to get the accomplishments that he was able to accomplish.
So to go back to your first interaction, what's the first time you remember meeting him? Was it at a practice, after leaving Romeoville, going back?
The first time, what we did is the Bulls would practice twice a day in training camp. That's when you did twice a day. You'd go 2 hours in the morning, and then you go like 2 hours at night. And so we would have fall conditioning at Romeoville from 4 to right after school, from like 3 o'clock to 4:30. And then I would hop in the car and drive an hour to Deerfield, where they practiced at the multiplex and in Northbrook, Deerfield, Northbrook. And I would get there, and then I would like take notes during the practice, and then I would rebound for guys after practice. You know what I mean? Because they'd want to get 30 to 45 minutes of extra shooting. So it just, not every night did I rebound for Michael, but a lot of times I did, or Paxton or whoever was there available. And so that's where I got to know him. And I remember one time I was in the training room, and he comes in, and I'm reading the Chicago Tribune, and I said, Michael, I guess they're going to extend your contract, or going to pick, you're negotiating a new contract. It was this rookie deal. You know what I mean? And he goes, I am? He goes, read me the article. And I'll never forget that. He didn't even know. So,
So what years was that? What years were you with?
Well, that would have been like 85, maybe 86. Right? I think that was Doug's first year. As a Bulls coach. I do remember he lived. This is how simple he and this is on the Last Dance. His first little condo was right next to Glenbrook North High School. It was like
really? Only
1 or 2 blocks away. Yeah, and it was right there on Finkston and Shermer. Right there. All right. So anyway, some of the students at Glenbrook North, they would take those Girl Scout cookies and sell, and he would say, yeah, come on in, let me get some money. You know what I mean? And he would buy and here he is doing his laundry, or his mom's there, or a buddy, but he would just invite the kids into his house, and then he'd get the money and they'd leave. That's how times have changed. That that wouldn't happen today, but that's how he was as a young pro.
Golly. So when you're watching The Last Dance, I mean, did that just bring up a ton of memories for you? What was that like watching it?
It was like I was there, or I saw all the news accounts, sports accounts, because I was a high school coach in Chicago. So I kind of knew what they were going to say right before they said it on the TV. And it was just amazing. I thought they did a wonderful job. And it showed you a great perspective of where Michael was coming from. And, so many of those stories obviously were very close to being accurate. And it was just an unbelievable time for everybody in Chicago. I mean, Phil Jackson did an incredible job of coaching that team. He molded a lot of different personalities together, and to win at a high level like that with those superstars and have everybody buy in, it was an amazing feat by the entire Bulls organization. And maybe Jerry Krause, even though he was the kind of the villain in the show and in real life, was smarter than a lot of people think, because he got them so mad at him that they went out and won in spite of him. So it was an amazing. I just riveted. In fact, I watched every episode like 2 or 3 times.
Wow. I love Coach Collins's perm. That was, to me, one of the highlights too. Was seeing
in the years that I coached with him for 8.5 years, but I've been friends with him since I've been like 21. So he's had a lot of different hairstyles and some different colors throughout the years.
Wow. So to go back to the Wizards, that phase, right? So you go through that. Do you remember getting the call that MJ was done?
Well, I was with him the day he got fired. I knew he was going to retire. He told us that he looked forward to his retirement, and I thought he could have played one more year, but I was hoping he would. But his knee was. We had to drain his knee about multiple times his second and final season with the Wizards. So he just said, "I'm done. I can't do it anymore." And but I was really disappointed. Then he was going to take over as president of the Wizards and do basically what he's doing now with the Bobcats, or the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was in my office, and he pulls in, and I meet him in the parking lot, and he goes, "We got to figure this out. I'm going to go upstairs now. The owners want to talk to me, and Doug is going to be my coach next year, but we got to figure some things out because I don't want to take a step back." And sure enough, 10 minutes later, I go to my office, and 10 minutes later, I hear they just fired Michael. And that's when you see the TV film sports highlight of him pulling out of the arena in his convertible. And no one ever saw him again in Washington. So that was a sad day for me. Sad day.
And have you talked to him since then? You ever bump into him?
Yeah, just not really, but I see him at the NBA Combine, the draft workout for the college juniors or seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't communicate too much anymore, but I've got those memories to build on. I'm very close friends with his confidant, George Kohler, who was in every scene almost.
Mm-hmm.
That's who drove him to downtown Chicago when he landed in Chicago for the first time, and no one was there to pick him up. That's how times have changed too. No one was there from the Bulls to pick him up. And George Kohler's ride didn't show, his limo. So he goes, "Hey, can you give me a ride downtown Chicago?" And they've been best friends ever since, and bodyguard and driver and confidant. So George and I stay in constant contact, but so I know, Michael's close thereby.
Man, oh man. So then what's the story of going to the Sixers then? Did Coach Collins gets that job? How many years later was that?
That was I broadcasted for the Wizards for 2 years. Their games after Doug decided he didn't want to coach anymore, and I still had a year left on my contract, so I broadcasted for 2 years. Then I went and coached in Milwaukee for 3, and that was with Terry Stotts and Larry Kostoviak. And I had a wonderful time there. My kids went to high school there. And then Doug called me up again and said, "I'm going to do this again for the fourth time, and I'm going to go to where I played. We're going to go to Philadelphia, and we're going to straighten out the mess that they're in." And I'll tell you what, we had a really, really good team. And, some of the players on our team was Andre Iguodala, Thad Young, Lou Williams, Drew Holiday. We drafted a kid number 2 in the draft by the name of Evan Turner. We had Elton Brand, who's now the general manager of Philly, Spencer Hawes, we just had a really, really good team. And we beat the Bulls. Remember, that's when Derrick Rose first hurt his knee. They were the number 1 seed. We were the number 8 seed. And we beat them in the first round in 6 games. And that was one of the, along with coaching in the All-Star game and winning playoff series, that was one of the highlights of my career, beating my hometown Bulls in the playoff.
Do you remember seeing D Rose go down? What was your first
Yeah,
thought?
it was only about 15 feet from me. It was right in front of us. It was near the end. There was only about 1:20 to go in the game, and they had a 12-point lead. And we had, we were gearing back up for game 2, but, we still had 1 or 2 starters in the game, but most of our subs. And unfortunately, he never, the one I love this about Derrick Rose, he never took a play off. He played hard every single possession. He took a lot of hard falls early in his career, but he came down wrong and on his right knee, and unfortunately right near the block area down the lane line, tore his knee up right in front of our bench.
But they were more than just him, and you did take care of business.
No. They had Joakim Noah. They had Carlos Boozer. They had a really, really good team, and they had a lot of weapons, and there was a reason why they were the number 1. But if you take away a team's best player, you can't win in the playoffs with a lot of injuries. You guys your team has to be healthy to win in the playoffs. Did
it ever occur to you that you're coaching a fellow CS8 player in Andre Iguodala from Lanphier? Did you guys ever talk about Sangamon?
Yeah, we would talk about, how you play against Taylorville and so forth. And I go, and I asked him at that time, why didn't you go to Illinois? And, they said, Bill Self said every time he went to see him play, he didn't play very well. He played with McBride in high school, so they took his teammate, not him. And Andre, is a really good guy. And he's one of the smartest players, not only about basketball, but he's one of the smartest players in about any field that you want to talk about. He's a real student of whatever he's studying. It might be stocks, it might be fashion, it might be golf. He would watch tape on basketball games, so he was really good. And you know what? He was our you see what he did with Golden State. He was MVP of the finals, and he was a great player for us. But some guys don't want to be the number 1 player, and he took a lot of flack in Philly. Everybody takes flack in Philly, by the way.
Yeah, Santa Claus took flack in Philly.
Yeah, so anyway, most of it was not deserved. He was our best player, and because he wasn't Michael Jordan or because he wasn't an elite player, sometimes they got on him for that. But he was great for us.
So what kind of
I'll tell you one Andre Iguodala story.
Yeah, please.
He won us that playoff series against the Bulls with something that he was only about a 54% free throw shooter, not very consistent from the line. That was one of the things. He made clutch threes at the end of the clock. He rebounded. He could guard all 5 positions. He could play point guard. He could play power forward for you, whatever you needed. But he wasn't a very good free throw shooter. And I'm trying to think of the backup center's name for the Bulls at that time.
Oh, was it Brad Miller?
No.
Omer Ashik?
That's who it was.
Omer Ashik?
Yeah, Ashik. And we basically horse-collared. We almost put him in a headlock. They threw the ball ahead to him, and Spencer Hawes, I thought they were going to call a flagrant foul. They did not. So Omar goes to the free throw line and misses both free throws. That would have ended the game and would have sent it to Game 7 in Chicago. And Andre Iguodala gets the rebound and just dribbles it down as fast as he can go. And with 2 seconds to go, the C parts, and he gets fouled laying the ball in the basket. Now, the ball does not go in, but he has to make both free throws. We're down one. And he goes to the line and swishes both free throws to win the playoff series for us. And so, the rest is history. So I'll always love Andre for that one story alone.
Wow, wait. So, okay, so then 76ers time, Coach Collins makes his transition. What was kind of your thinking at the end of that tenure? Did you think, I might sort of,
Well,
I've had a good 40-year run.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I would have loved to have stayed. I would have loved to have stayed there, or go somewhere else. But the thing that kind of put the nail in the coffin is we make a great playoff run. We lose in Game 7 after we beat the Bulls. We lose to Boston Celtics with the big three in Game 7, and with 4 minutes to go, we've got we've got a 1-point lead, or we're down 1, and Paul Pierce fouls out of the game in Game 7 with about 4.5 minutes to go. And I said, we are going to win this series and play Miami with LeBron and those guys in the Eastern Conference Finals, being the AC. And Rondo took over the game the last 3 minutes and won the game for the Celtics. But after that season, our ownership wanted to get a star, a top 10 player. So that means I mean our group wanted either the best player at his spot, point guard, or the second best point guard in the NBA. So we went down every position. Who was the best player at that position, and who is the second best player at that position? So we put 10 guys down. Well, at that time, what we felt the second best center in that time era was Andrew Bynum with the Los Angeles
Yeah,
Lakers.
he was great with the Lakers.
He was like 21, 22, 23 years old. He was coming into his prime. So we traded 3 players and a number 1 draft choice for Andrew Bynum, and he never played 1 second for the 76ers because of knee problems. And so they basically traded their whole team and for Andrew, and it didn't work out. So Doug, we stayed 1 year, and then Doug didn't really want to coach the team anymore. Didn't want to go through the trusted process scenario that it took him like 5 or 6 years to get through. And so that's right when Chris Collins was getting the itch to be a head coach, leave Duke after 13 years as a coach, and here I am back in Chicago again.
What's the most, you could just be done right now. What's the most gratifying thing to you about coaching at the college level right now in your current role?
Well, I'll tell you what, getting Northwestern, they had not into the NCAA tournament was one of the greatest things and feelings in my life. Besides, your own family accomplishments and your kids and family. But Northwestern had not been to the NCAA in 78 years of existence for basketball. And for us to not win the Big Ten, but we were good enough to win 24 games, a school record, beat Michigan on a Hail Mary play to solidify getting in the NCAA, getting to the Final Four of the Big Ten tournament, and then going to Salt Lake City, winning a game against Vanderbilt. I'll never forget those moments, and I cherish those. And it's probably one of the proudest moments of my life of doing that. And so if we could ever do that again, I'd love to be able to do that before I ride off into the sunset.
Man, oh man. Yeah, but how does that moment and molding some of these young guys, does that kind of tap into your first love of high school? The fact that you get
it really is. We've got great kids in our program at Northwestern. We got student athletes. When I say student athletes, guys who like to go to class, they take pride in their grades. They may not be all conference players, most of them, but we've had our share of all conference players, and we have to do a really good job of skill development. But, we've got good kids in our program, and I love going to work every day. They keep me young. So when these kids are 19 through 22, and I'm throwing them pass after pass after pass, or putting them through drills, or running up and down, reffing the scrimmage, or doing whatever, working with our big guys, number one, I still get a thrill going to the gym every day.
That's awesome. Any final thoughts about just kind of your anything we didn't touch on in your career that I should have asked you about, or any stories that popped in your mind that you wish I would have asked about?
Let me think. I don't know that. I think you did a really good job. It's just that I have a hard time just separating the fact that I loved every school that I coached at. It was a journey in its own path. I was in Taylorville coaching for 7 years as an assistant coach, was not the head coach. I loved the guys I worked with there. But then I was ready to be a head coach at age 30. And so Romeoville took a chance on a young kid, and I was the head coach in both basketball and baseball. See, I just kind of gravitated to basketball only just because probably I had more success, I had better players. But I love baseball just as much.
Wow.
And so anyway, I was a varsity coach, coached like 4 different sports. And so I've got a lot of admiration of high school coaches. And it's just that I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the ride. I'm not used to being the old guy on the staff, but I was always the youngest guy on the staff. I believe I was the youngest. The IHSA told me I was still 20 years old when I was named the head basketball coach at Wilmington for 1 year. I was there for 1 year before I went to Taylorville. And I was 20 when I took the job in July. I was not 21 until November of my first year.
How is that even possible? Weren't you at ISU?
Yeah, but I was young. I was young for my age, for my class, So I was like, I was just 21, my first game,
So would you go up to Wilmington like after class? Like that's like an hour away.
No. I was graduated. I just graduated, and I was still only 20, I think, when I graduated.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah. So no, Wilmington was my first job.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. After so.
That's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking all this time. I got about 80 more questions I could ask you, but I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to share about your history. And I know everybody in not just Taylorville, but our whole viewing area is really proud to see that you literally reached the top and you haven't changed. You're still the same high character guy. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate that, Gordon. And a lot of my best friends are the guys that I grew up with in Taylorville. And to this day, I just love that city more than anybody could ever imagine. So, it's great. I love going back there and seeing everybody and doing whatever I can to help.